Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive into the source material you sent over. I mean, we are just incredibly excited to explore this one with you today.
Yeah, we really are. It's a fantastic stack of sources.
It totally is. To just kind of kick things off, I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. What if the absolute greatest strategic advantage a civilization could possess wasn't, overwhelming firepower or some impenetrable planetary shield? What if it was just the sheer, deliberately crafted illusion of vulnerability?
Right, which is a completely counterintuitive idea. We are so conditioned to think of power entirely in terms of visibility.
Yeah, exactly.
You build the biggest fortress, you parade your largest missiles around, you just make sure everyone sees your strength so that they don't dare test you. In geopolitics, or astropolitics in this case, deterrence is almost always about putting your weapons right in the shop window for everyone to see.
But the stack of sources we're looking at today detailing this brilliant science fiction narrative called the Hidden Armada, well, it flips that entire concept of deterrence totally on its head.
It really does.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore what happens when humanity weaponizes its own perceived weakness. We're going to travel to the year 2317 to examine humanity's greatest deception. We'll look at the leadership of Commander Sarah Kane and this monumental conflict with an alien empire known as the Zareth Dominion.
A truly epic conflict.
Well, reading through these sources, I was just struck by the absolute audacity of the strategy. I mean, it's a masterful study in playing the long game.
It's a fascinating thought experiment. At its core, the source material uses this grand space opera setting to explore some very grounded, very real themes about perception. It looks at the true mechanics of power and, what a civilization is actually willing to do to secure its own survival.
Yeah.
It really asked us to look closely at that massive gap between what is presented to the public eye and the hidden mechanisms operating right beneath the surface.
So setting the stage here, the year is 2317. Humanity has been part of the Galactic Alliance for about a century. Earth is respected for its diplomacy and trade, but they definitely aren't feared.
No, not at all.
The rest of the galaxy looks at humanity and sees this peaceful neighbor with a very, very modest defense fleet. We're talking about exactly 300 visible ships. That's it.
Right. And 300 ships on a galactic scale is essentially a neighborhood watch program.
Right.
It's enough to deter casual piracy along the trade routes, maybe, but it is certainly not the fleet of a major military power. And according to the narrative, that is precisely the diplomatic profile humanity wanted to project.
They did it on purpose.
Exactly. They actively cultivated this image of being a non-threat. They integrated themselves into the galactic economy while appearing, completely reliant on the alliance for major defense.
Which works reasonably well, right up until an expansionist empire decides to test those boundaries. Enter the Zareth Dominion. These guys are the premier military power in the galaxy, and their doctrine relies entirely on overwhelming force.
Pure brute force, yeah.
So they issue this brutal galaxy-wide broadcast ultimatum to Earth. They basically say, surrender your colonies within 7 days or be erased.
It's a classic imperial maneuver. And the reaction of the broader Galactic Council is really telling here. They just panic.
Total panic.
Yeah, they urge Earth to just comply, to cede the colonies to ensure the survival of the species. Because the Council has entirely bought into the illusion. They're calculating the odds based on their 300-ship fleet, and the raw mathematics dictate that humanity is about to be completely annihilated.
But Earth's prime commander doesn't panic. The sources note that he simply smiles, observing that the Zareth, quote, still think they've seen our navy.
I love that line.
It's so good. So when day 7 arrives, the Zareth call humanity's bluff. They warp into the solar system at Jupiter with 20,000 warships. I mean, it's an armada that literally darkens the stars.
The visual disparity alone is just staggering. You have 20,000 top-of-the-line Imperial warships going up against a defensive force of 300.
And humanity actually launches those 300 ships to meet them. Within minutes, the human fleet is totally overwhelmed and forced into a rapid retreat. This whole skirmish is being broadcast live, by the way. Billions of aliens across the galaxy are watching this feed, utterly convinced they're witnessing the final days of the human race.
It really looked like the end.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this specific scenario reminds me of a very practical security tactic. Have you ever heard of carrying a decoy wallet when you're traveling in a rough neighborhood?
A decoy wallet? You mean like carrying a secondary wallet with just a few dollars in it, kept completely separate from your actual valuables?
Exactly. You put a $5 bill and maybe a couple of expired gift cards and a really cheap wallet.
Right.
If a mugger confronts you, you look terrified. You hand over the decoy wallet, and they just run off. You gave them exactly what they expected to see: a scared tourist handing over their cash.
Right.
Because they got the result they anticipated, they don't even bother to search your shoe where your real money and your passport are actually hidden.
That makes perfect sense.
That visible fleet of 300 ships, that was humanity's decoy wallet.
What's fascinating here is how that analogy perfectly highlights the psychology of the Zareth Dominion. The sources are explicitly showing us a textbook case of confirmation bias.
Oh, totally.
The Zareth expect weaker species to either fold immediately or just put up a pathetic, futile resistance. When they saw the 300 ships retreat, it entirely validated their preconceived notions about humanity's weakness.
But wait, I have to stop you there.
Okay.
The Zareth conquered the galaxy. You don't build a 20,000 ship armada by being stupid, right?
Yeah. Fair point.
How did their intelligence agencies miss a hidden military force? Was it just pure arrogance on their part, or was humanity actively spoofing their sensors?
That is the crucial question. And it wasn't just arrogance. It was highly sophisticated systemic data manipulation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sources detail how humanity actively fed the Zareth intelligence network's false metrics. When Zareth's spy drones scanned human space, human sensor buoys subtly altered the gravitational telemetry to hide the mass of larger structures.
Oh.
They didn't just hide the truth, they mathematically proved the lie. The arrogance of the Zareth just made them far less likely to double-check the math. So they saw the retreat of those 300 ships as a desperate, failing maneuver, completely missing that they were being lured into a massive kill box.
A giant trap. Because the perceived defeat wasn't a retreat, it was this carefully choreographed pulling of the curtain.
Exactly.
So, while the Zareth fleet is out there celebrating their easy victory at Jupiter, operating on this completely flawed assumption, the narrative focuses in on Commander Sarah Kane. She isn't on a bridge somewhere in the chaos of space. She's completely isolated, walking into a highly secure bunker buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica.
The contrast in the narrative pacing here is just brilliant. Above, out in space, it's chaos, plasma fire, and perceived defeat. Below, in the ice, it is chillingly calm. She just places her hand on an ancient control panel, interfacing with this deep core AI system.
The code she uses is Authorization Atlas Omega. The AI confirms her identity and asks a very simple question: release the Hidden Armada.
And she doesn't hesitate.
Not at all. Kane just says, release everything. When she gives that order, the Earth itself begins to transform.
It's such a cinematic moment in the text.
It really is. The sources describe massive tectonic doors opening deep beneath the oceans. We're talking about entire mountain ranges splitting apart to reveal these subterranean launch bays. The oceans are boiling and trembling as these gigantic shipyards rise up right through the waves.
And this geographical transformation wasn't just isolated to Earth either.
No, it was system-wide. Hollowed-out asteroids in the belt suddenly cracked open. Abandoned moons across the outer planets just woke up. And from all these hidden locations, warships started pouring out.
It's incredible to visualize.
Thousands at first, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Over 1 million human warships powered online simultaneously. 1 million.
The sources emphasize a really critical detail here that completely changes the context of human history in this universe. These ships had been hidden, built in total secrecy for over 200 years.
200 years, just waiting.
Exactly. Every colony, every quiet mining world, every asteroid outpost was secretly a fortress or a factory contributing to this singular, massive goal.
Okay, I have to push back here on the logistics.
Sure, go for it.
Because you're an expert in systems and strategy. How does a civilization successfully hide the construction of 1 million warships for 2 centuries?
It's a fair question.
Think about the supply chains, right? The sheer energy output required. How is there not a single whistleblower or an alien inspector who looks at an asteroid and says, hey, why is this random rock consuming as much power as a small country?
It is arguably the most compelling logistical puzzle in the entire narrative, and the sources answer it by explaining this concept of thermodynamic and economic camouflage.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, if you look at the thermal signature of a standard mining operation, it produces massive heat waste from smelting ore. Humanity engineered their clandestine shipyards to match that exact thermal footprint.
Oh.
Right. So, to an alien sensor sweep, the energy output of forging a battleship hull looked completely identical to standard civilian ore refinement.
So they didn't hide the factories in the dark. They hid them right in plain sight.
Precisely. A mining colony wasn't hiding a factory. The mining colony was the factory. They didn't need to import suspicious amounts of materials because all the materials were being mined, processed, and assembled on-site inside the hollowed-out asteroids.
That is so clever.
And as for whistleblowers, it really speaks to a unified generational discipline. They realized early on that in a galaxy full of empires, peace is never permanent. If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, we should also address the moral ambiguity of this, shouldn't we?
Right, because reading this, I couldn't help but think, isn't that inherently deceptive?
Right.
I mean, you present yourselves to the Galactic Council as these peaceful diplomats. You're signing treaties, shaking hands, while literally sitting on an apocalyptic powder keg.
From a purely objective standpoint, yes, it's a monumental deception. To the Galactic Alliance, peace meant a lack of weapons. It meant disarmament and trust.
Right. By those definitions, humanity was actively violating the fundamental tenets of galactic diplomacy. But from humanity's perspective, this deception was the only logical insurance policy in a highly hostile universe. They weren't building the fleet to conquer. They were building it because they recognize that treaties only protect you right up until someone decides to break them. And the Zereth Dominion definitely broke them. Which brings us back to Jupiter, the trap springs. The Zereth officers who were literally just mocking the initial retreat are now staring at their tactical displays in absolute paralyzing horror.
The tables turned so fast.
Their scanners are suddenly flooded with 1 million new contacts. The text says, quote, "The stars themselves seem to disappear behind endless formations." And into that stunned silence, Commander Kane broadcasts a single sentence to the Zereth fleet: "You attacked the wrong species."
It's the moment the psychological warfare instantly transitions into overwhelming physical devastation. The Zereth command structure is completely paralyzed by the sudden influx of data. They were anticipating a surrender, and instead, they're facing a force 50 times their size.
And the Battle of Sol is not a typical back-and-forth space battle. It is a clinical, systematic dismantling of the galaxy's supposedly greatest empire.
Clinical is the perfect word for it.
The sources outline these terrifyingly precise human tactics. I'd love for you to explain some of the mechanics here, actually, because they mention rail cannons shattering flagships from insane distances. How does that even work in ship-to-ship combat?
Well, a rail cannon, in this context, uses electromagnetic fields to accelerate a very dense tungsten slug to a significant fraction of the speed of light. Because there is no friction in space, that slug maintains its kinetic energy indefinitely.
That's terrifying.
It really is. Humanity was firing these from light seconds away, so by the time the Zereth sensors even registered the thermal bloom of the weapon firing, the slug had already torn straight through their hull.
The sources also detail these autonomous drone swarms, completely overwhelming the Zereth carriers, and human stealth destroyers appearing out of nowhere right behind enemy lines. The supposedly unstoppable Zereth fleet basically collapses in a matter of hours.
It was a total rout.
And the Galactic Council is watching this on their screens in stunned silence. But as we know, the Zereth Dominion didn't conquer the galaxy by retreating.
No, they certainly didn't. And the narrative pushes the conflict to an absolute breaking point here, with the arrival of the Zereth Emperor himself. Refusing to accept defeat, he warps into the system in his personal command ship.
And this thing is a monster. It is 50 kilometers long.
Massive.
The sources explicitly state it is a literal planet killer, carrying enough firepower to crack the Earth's crust. And he broadcasts his own grand declaration saying, "I will burn Earth myself."
It's a totally desperate escalation. When conventional forces fail, the Emperor resorts to the ultimate threat of planetary annihilation. He's hoping the sheer terror of losing our homeworld will force humanity to finally stand down.
But before his weapons arrays can even fully charge, humanity reveals its final secret. From the shadow of Saturn's rings, the HSS Leviathan emerges.
The Leviathan.
Yeah. If the Emperor's ship was a monster, the Leviathan is a god. It is nearly 300 kilometers long. It's powered by an artificial star, and it's equipped with gravity weapons. Let's dig into that for a second. How exactly does a gravity weapon work in this context?
According to the source material, the Leviathan's weapons don't fire energy beams or projectiles like a standard cannon. They actually generate localized microsingularities.
Like tiny black holes.
Essentially, yes, tiny short-lived black holes. By projecting these inside an enemy vessel, the gravity weapon creates immense tidal forces that shear the molecular bonds of the target.
So it's tearing the ship apart on a molecular level.
Exactly. It literally bends the space the enemy ship occupies, tearing their power cores apart from the inside out without necessarily detonating them.
Which perfectly explains what happens next. The Leviathan fires one shot. Just one. and it completely disables the Emperor's 50-kilometer flagship.
Right.
It's the difference between using a wrecking ball to open a door versus picking the lock. They picked the lock on a planet killer. They didn't vaporize the ship, they just turned it off.
The precision of that strike is just as important as the staggering scale of the ship that actually delivered it.
The Emperor is sitting in the dark on a dead ship, completely broken, and he just whispers, "How long have humans been preparing?" And Sarah Kane replies, "Long enough."
It's such incredible dialogue.
It really is. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I want to focus on that restraint. Because they had this godlike ship. They could have vaporized the Emperor and sent a message of pure, unadulterated terror to the rest of the galaxy.
They absolutely could have.
What does that flex of precision actually communicate?
It is the ultimate display of absolute dominance. If you vaporize your enemy with a giant laser, you show that you have overwhelming brute force. But if you surgically disable the most powerful weapon in the enemy's arsenal without destroying it, you prove something far more terrifying. You prove you have flawless control over your power. It communicates to the Zereth Emperor and to the entire Galactic Council watching that humanity's violence is a highly calculated choice, not an uncontrollable impulse. They apply exactly as much force as is required to neutralize the threat, and not a fraction more.
And that restraint on the battlefield really sets the stage for the aftermath of the war, which shocked the rest of the galaxy even more. The battle ends. The Zereth surrender. The Galactic Council is terrified, and they demand answers from Earth's ambassador. They essentially ask, if you had this kind of power for 2 centuries, why didn't you conquer the galaxy yourselves?
The ambassador's response is really the thematic anchor of the entire narrative. They state, "We never built this fleet for conquest. We built it so no one would ever conquer us."
It's a profound paradigm shift for the alien species. They suddenly realize why humans were always so polite in diplomatic meetings, why they rarely threatened anyone or got involved in petty border disputes.
Right. They didn't need to posture aggressively because they were quietly sitting on 1,000,000 warships.
Exactly. And this philosophy dictates how humanity reorganizes the galactic power structure in the aftermath. The Zereth Dominion's territories are fractured, and the worlds they previously occupied are liberated. But rather than taking those worlds for themselves, rather than replacing the Zereth Empire with a humanity repurposes the Hidden Armada.
This is one of the most compelling turns in the story.
It was my absolute favorite detail in the entire stack of sources. They take these terrifying, sleek engines of destruction and they convert them into logistical support vessels. They use the Armada to escort relief ships. They start distributing food, medical supplies, and heavy rebuilding equipment to their former enemies.
The shift in utility is amazing.
The sources note that because they did this, the sheer terror the galaxy felt after the Battle of Sol was quickly replaced by a very deep, very enduring respect.
It's a masterclass in post-conflict resolution. You mentioned earlier the idea of repurposing space. Think about a warship's design, right? You have massive cargo bays meant for munitions and troops. Humanity simply swapped out the munitions for medical supplies and agricultural equipment.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this deep dive? When I read this, I immediately thought of Theodore Roosevelt's famous foreign policy proverb, "Speak softly and carry a big stick."
Ah, yes.
The underlying logic is that you don't need to yell if everyone intuitively knows you have the means to back up your words. Except, in humanity's case, in 2317, they spoke softly, and the stick they were carrying was roughly the size of a solar system.
This raises an important question about the philosophy of deterrence. True power isn't actually defined by how much destruction you can cause. Any advanced civilization can build a bomb or a massive dreadnought.
Sure.
True power is defined by what you choose to do after you have won. The transition humanity makes from deploying warships to deploying relief ships is what really cemented their legacy.
It totally changes how they're viewed.
Exactly. If they had conquered the Zereth and subjugated them, they would have spent the next 1,000 years fighting insurgencies and rebellions. But by rebuilding their enemies, they secured a permanent, unassailable peace.
It's the fundamental difference between forcing a defeated enemy to bow to you versus offering them a hand up and convincing them to shake it.
Beautifully put.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And that legacy is exactly how the sources wrap up this incredible narrative. We jump centuries into the future. The events of 2317 are now ancient history. But the impact of that deception was so profound that military academies across the entire galaxy now teach one fundamental, unbreakable rule: never judge humanity by what it shows you.
Because the illusion of vulnerability was so perfectly executed the first time, Humanity's public face can never be fully trusted again. The galaxy has learned that somewhere beyond the reach of their sensors, hidden beneath the surface of seemingly peaceful pastoral colonies, another hidden armada might be waiting.
The visible fleet will always be viewed as the decoy wallet.
Oh.
And if the stars ever grow dark with an invading force again, humanity will just crack open a few more moons.
It's an unassailable strategic position. But, as we wrap up, I think there is a lingering, really provocative question here that the sources hint at but don't fully resolve.
What's that?
Well, we've talked extensively about what this grand deception did to the galaxy and how it saved Earth. But think about the internal cost. What did this do to humanity itself?
Wait, what do you mean by that?
I mean, for 200 years, generations of humans lived a complete lie. Trillions of people went to work in mines and factories, sworn to absolute secrecy, constantly preparing for an apocalyptic war that wouldn't happen for centuries.
Oh, wow. Hadn't thought of that.
Imagine the immense psychological burden of that. The overarching question isn't just whether they fooled the galaxy, it's what happens to the human soul when a civilization's entire cultural foundation is built on a paranoid, generational lie. Can a society ever truly be at peace with itself if its very existence requires constant secret preparations for total war?
Wow. That is a heavy, incredibly thought-provoking angle to leave you with. A society saved by a secret, but forever burdened by the paranoia required to keep it. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive into the Hidden Armada.
It's been an absolute thrill.
It really has. Exploring the logistics, the strategy, and the mechanics of this universe with you has been amazing. As you go about your day, we hope you'll take a moment to ponder the true nature of power, the immense value of restraint, and perhaps look twice at the things in your own life that seem just a little too vulnerable.
Because you never know what might be quietly waiting beneath.